Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab. We get to have conversations that help empower healthy churches. We love getting to do that and love that you're joining us for another one of those today. My name's Scott. I'm one of your hosts. This is Casey, your other host. Hello, Casey. How's it going today?
It's going good, Scott. How are you? How's everything in your world?
Everything is beautiful, wonderful. Things are going great. I'm actually about to head out. This is a little behind the scenes for people. This is we're recording this on a Friday, and I am about to head out to a youth winter retreat with our church. I'm going to help lead worship, hang out with kids, pouring them all that stuff. So I'm both excited and also embracing the fact that I will not sleep much over the next couple days. So.
Yeah, you just kind of like sealed that deal when you said but what are the age groups? Like when you say a bunch of kids, like really, what are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's middle school and high school. So
oh boy,
6th grade, through high school. So
how many of them? How many of these little tiny humans will you be pouring into this weekend?
Yeah, well enough. I think we have maybe 40, 50 kids going.
That's enough.
Which 2 of mine are a part of that. So
that's fair.
It's going to be awesome. I'm excited about it. But also, just preparing for some late nights and some fun.
Hey, you and I both have a fun-filled youth weekend. As soon as we finish here, I'm headed out of town for a gymnastics meet. So that is like a whole weekend thing. When you have a traveling competitive gymnast, I get it. So I only have one. You've got 50. So, we'll report back on Monday and make sure we both lived.
That is, that's a commitment. Hopefully we make it. I'm sure we will.
We're strong. We're like resilient people.
Yeah, we can do it. We can do it. We'll just tell ourselves that we can do it.
All right. I'll check on you on Monday.
Excellent. Well, hey, we're so excited for today's conversation that we're going to have with Ryan Brown, CEO of Open Doors US. Ryan has been serving in that role at Open Doors US, which helps people stand with more than 365 million Christians around the globe who suffer high levels of persecution and discrimination for their faith. With extensive experience in shepherding teams for kingdom impact, he is passionate about helping U.S. believers grow their faith as they connect with their persecuted family around the globe. Now, prior to joining the organization, Ryan served as Chief Development Officer at a global nonprofit, Food for the Hungry, and has a diverse background, including time spent as a stockbroker, singer-songwriter, concert promoter, and for a short time ran a small Christian music record label. Now, he's a graduate of Arizona State University, holds a dual bachelor's degree in business management and English, and has completed postgraduate courses at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business. Ryan, we're so glad to have you here on the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you. It sounds like you guys got a lot of Red Bull and fiery hot Cheetos in your plans for this coming weekend. So appreciate the opportunity to sneak in before all that kicks in.
Yeah, that's a perfect description.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, hey, as we jump in, one of the things we love to hear, obviously we just had your public bio, but we always love to dig a little bit deeper and love to hear from people. What's something that doesn't make your public bio that all your friends and family would know about you?
Yeah, well, a couple things. One, my family, we've been really involved in foster care and adoption, and so that's been a huge part of our journey just as a family as well as through our church. Walking with a lot of families that have also been on that journey. I think the second thing is a bit of a Star Wars fan. So grew up, it defined so much of my youth. And I think in recent years, it's probably, the Star Wars universe has expanded a little bit quicker than some of my limited bandwidth of attention has been able to keep pace with. But still very much love that.
Now, do you have, let me ask you this. How do you feel about, and I always forget the episode number, is it episode 1 through 3, the ones that came out, not the most recent kind of evolution,
the prequel.
But the first time they're like,
yep.
Yeah. How do you feel about those?
I like them. I mean, it's one, that's not the top on my list, but number 3, there was some powerful stuff in there. That's for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I know that can be polarizing among the Star Wars fans I have in my life, so I always like to see how people feel.
Yeah. So maybe I'm a little bit more lenient.
Yeah.
you had like a twinge of an apology there, Ryan, of like, I like it / like, I'm sorry. Cause there's people are like not okay with it, like the true originals. But I like that you're like, no, I like it and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm fearful maybe half of your listeners have just clicked off. I've lost all credibility with them, but street cred is gone.
I appreciate your honesty. So I like it. It's a good answer.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, Ryan, let's out of Star Wars. Let's shift to your real world. Tell us a little bit like the brief history of Open Doors, like where you guys came from, and then what is the work that you guys are doing today?
Yeah, so thanks. So Open Doors started just about 70 years ago. A guy by the name of Brother Andrew. He had traveled to Warsaw, Poland. As he met the church there, recognized there was an incredible need for folks to have access to the written word of God. And so he began smuggling Bibles behind the Iron Curtain, a little blue VW bug. And it did that for a number of years, smuggling thousands and thousands of Bibles. A number of years later, there was a book written by him that many folks may have read called God Smuggler. It had sold over 10 million copies, been translated into multiple different languages. But that work gave birth to a ministry that he started called Open Doors. And we served to walk alongside the persecuted church around the globe. We're now serving in about 70 different countries around the globe. And recognizing that the face of persecution looks different in each of those contexts, we look to respond in different ways. In some ways, it still is very much providing access to the written word of God. In some cases, that's not the issue. In some cases, it's, issues have been denied access to livelihoods or education. And so we come alongside the local church, seeking to support the local church be the hands and feet of Christ in the context of their persecution.
That's incredible. So 70 years and 70 countries. I don't know if that's a little happy accident, but I like that. It's really neat.
It's a coincidence that we can rally behind for the next year or so. Yeah.
There you go. We got to make it to 80 countries in 80 years. You got to keep going.
There you go.
Well, Ryan, what is maybe, we talk about persecution of the church, and, I think some of us kind of know conceptually what that means, but on a little bit more, I don't know, like maybe a conversational level, help us understand what's maybe not talked about or what's missed when we talk about persecution that the global church might be facing.
Yeah, no, I love that question just because it really gets at the heart of something that I think is really important for us to understand as a church. And, if I take it out of the context of the persecuted church and just like talk about, if we as a church or as an organization are seeking to address poverty, the goal of that is to end poverty. Our goal is to bring a close to that, to folks that are living in poverty to no longer be in poverty, or we're fighting illiteracy. Our goal is to teach people to read so that they are no longer impacted by illiteracy. But as we walk alongside the persecuted church, I think it's easy for us to assume that our goal would be to end persecution. Our goal would be to lift those people or rescue people that experience persecution out of that context of persecution. But as we walk with the persecuted church, that's not what they're asking for from us. And this idea, to me, anyways, is just so countercultural because we talked about movies. I want the Hollywood ending. I want the Death Star to be blown up twice. I want the good guys to win, the bad guys to lose. But yet, when it comes to the kingdom of God, so many times our understanding of what it means to win is so upside down. What Scripture describes is something that's really, really countercultural. And our brothers and sisters around the globe that experience persecution, I think, have an insight into this that sometimes escapes us. Because again, they're not asking to be rescued from their persecution, but they're asking to be supported so that they can be the church in that context of persecution, that they can be the hands and feet of Christ, that they can be supported and prayed for and encouraged in ways that their testimony won't falter or fail. And I think that is just something that's so important for us to be able to lock into and to understand, because I don't think any of us would argue that we are increasingly living in a post-Christian culture.
Right.
And for many of us, and for pastors, for those that have been called to shepherd, for so many of us, that's just new territory. That's not territory we're familiar with. And we have brothers and sisters around the globe who have gone before us in this and have, at great cost, are living lives in which they are using their faith to determine how they're going to engage their culture rather than using
Mhm.
their culture to determine how they're going to engage their faith. And so, I think
Mm.
that there's so much opportunity for us to learn from our brothers and sisters around the globe. And so, I love the question that you asked there.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
I
well,
think too,
I think too,
you bring up an
you bring up an
interesting point
interesting point
because
because
we
we
often, I
often,
feel
I
like
feel like
in the
in the
West, it's
West,
like
it's like
there's a
there's a
problem. How do we
problem. How
solve
do
it?
we
And we
solve it?
use that
And
mentality and sort of walk, with that mentality. And so I feel like that's so helpful for us to just step back and realize actually walking through persecution is oftentimes part of following Jesus. We have a sheltered experience comparatively in the West, specifically here in the U.S. As you said, culture and things are changing here, but I think that's so helpful to hear as a reminder that it's not about eliminating the problem; it's about supporting to continue to be able to make it through. I think that's really a really important point.
Yeah, Jesus himself said, blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake. For theirs is the
Yeah.
kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you and falsely on my account. And he says to
Mhm.
rejoice and be glad. That again feels countercultural to me. That's not my default reaction. But again, I think that's a reflection that in ways I've been discipled by my culture rather than discipled my culture.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, one of
Now,
the things
one of
I'm
the things
curious
I'm
about,
curious
because
about,
it's easy for us, I think, in the West, again, particularly in the US, to kind of have blinders on and conveniently ignoring this. And I know that there's plenty of things here to work through in ministry and the church, but how can people really fight against those blinders of what's going on in the global church and get a better awareness of the reality of the situation?
Yeah, great question, and that's one of the things that we look to do with Open Doors is to be able to provide resources for people on that. In many cases, governments try to hide these types of things. It's not things that they brag about or boast about, and so in many cases there are a lot of things that would try to suppress and to keep those stories quiet around the globe. And so we, again, with 70 years, we do have networks of staff and church partners and partnerships that we are working with around the globe that are able to provide this frontline information and provide resources. And so, on our website, we have things like we put out what we call a world watch list every year, which highlights the 50 countries around the world where persecution is the greatest. That was just released recently in January for this 2024 year. And part of what we do in that is not just the raising of the awareness of the issue, but providing people practical ways that they can
Mm.
support the prayer and engage in those things, providing specific prayer points. There are some of these situations that are so dark, it's difficult to even know how to pray at times.
Yeah.
And so in those cases, we look to offer up those prayer resources to provide people with that. And, prayer has an amazing way of just aligning our heart to the heart of our Father. And, God refers to the church as his bride. There's a love there. There's a passion there for his church. And so as we look to lift up our brothers and sisters in prayer, it aligns our heart to the heart of our Father. And we find
Yeah.
that we develop a passion and a care and a concern for our brothers and sisters around the globe.
Yeah, absolutely. And we certainly want to link to that list. We'll kind of get some of those details a little later in the show so that people can engage with that and begin to kind of, like you said, tune their heart to the heart of the Father. Now, I know that in general, the church in the U.S. Is experiencing challenges, and in some places, a lot of places, experiencing decline. I think that could be said of a lot, even outside of just the U.S., but North America. But that's not necessarily true of the global church. And whether it's South America, Africa, Asia, I mean, the church is seeing tremendous growth. However, it's also growing, not however, but in addition to growing in places where there's persecution and where it is an incredible sacrifice to begin to follow Jesus. Do you see any correlation between the places where the church is experiencing persecution and at the same time growth? And if you do, what is that? Why do you think that is, and what can we maybe learn from that?
Yeah. In many places around the globe, that is the case. There is absolutely a correlation that is undeniable there. And I think it's important just even to recognize that that's not necessarily new. I mean, when you take a look at the New Testament, most of that was written by or written to people that were experiencing persecution. The very cradles of the Christian church were ones that experienced persecution. And so, at times it can be difficult, and you could maybe even debate, if you will, just kind of this chicken versus the egg type of thing. Is it because, that the church is persecuted that experiences growth, or is it because it's experiencing growth that is being persecuted? And I think it's really not necessarily kind of that either or type of a thing. I don't think it's a chicken and the egg thing. I think it's more of a both and or a snowball type of thing.
Yeah.
I think that as the church is growing, the enemy is doing all that it can to stomp it out. And as it's being stomped out, the Scripture itself tells us that not even the gates of hell are going to prevail against the church. And so you see that the church, cling to what is important. Christ, compared the kingdom of heaven to, a pearl of great price. And I think when there are things, and persecution does this, it forces us to count that cost of our faith. It forces us to say, okay, will we hold the kingdom of heaven as higher and more important than these tribulations that we experience? And when we do make that decision and recognize and count that cost, that has a sharpening effect on our faith, and it drives our faith forward. So absolutely, there's a correlation in so many places around the globe. And again, I do think those things just tend to snowball with each other.
Yeah.
I love that. In the I'm kind of going back a little bit, but I'm going to tie this together, I promise. I love that you mentioned, like, we think that our solution, or like our part to play, is to eradicate persecution, when it's really to be a partner in that pure persecution. And it was decades ago, so I'm going to totally butcher this, but I was immediately reminded of a book I read 1,000 years ago called When Helping Hurts. It kind of like challenges that Western mindset of like the short-term mission trip. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's absolute value. Do not twist I'm not knocking short-term mission trips, but that's a very like privileged Western mindset. I'm going to come in for 7 to 10 days and like change this whole situation, and like really rethinking that's not the solution. Maybe that's not even what God asked me to do, but in my Western mind, that's what I thought would be this wonderful thing. I love that you're kind of saying, hey, that's actually not it. It's not to make it go away, but it's to be more tactically supportive in this very specific way. So coming full circle a little bit, our audience is mostly church leaders. So what can we learn on the local church level of doing a better job to actually serve persecuted churches across the globe? It's kind of a two-part question, but I want to pause there. What can we learn to do a better job?
Yeah, I think you bring up a great point, and I love that book, and I've had opportunity to meet and converse with both the authors of that book, and just an incredible men, incredible, understanding of scripture and missions and all of that. And there's so much good framing thought as it relates to this topic as well. So, I think one of the things that I've just been struck by is actually it points to the beauty of the way that Christ has designed the church. It's not a situation that we come with solutions, but rather when we all come to the table, Christ has made it so that we all have something to offer. And that's not a testament to any one of us, but it's a testament to the beauty and the way that Christ has designed his church. It just so happens that, in many cases that the things that we in the West have been gifted with are resources. And, I take a look at, in Corinthians and, Paul talks about, the God of all comfort. And, he brings out this point, this idea that, the God of all comfort has provided us comfort, not just so that we can be comfortable, but rather so that we can provide comfort to others. And as we engage with our persecuted brothers and sisters, yes, we have a freedom, but that's not something that we should feel guilty about. That's not something that we should celebrate. It's something that we should recognize as a gift, and we should be thankful for, and we should fully lean into and appreciate that. But we should also recognize that gift of the freedom that we've been given has not just been for the sake of our own enjoyment and our own comfort, but there's a responsibility that comes with that. I've got a friend and a colleague, and he was telling me the other day about he had been to Vietnam and was in the small house church, and this was an area of the country where if it was known by neighbors and things that worship was going on here, that there could have been dire consequences for that. And so as they came together, that they are singing worship songs, but they're singing it in a whisper, just whispering these worship songs. And as my friend and colleague was kind of engaging with another gentleman there from Vietnam, as this guy said, yeah, we have to whisper here. But he said, when you go home, that means that you need to tell people they need to worship all the louder, that they need to, we're part of one body. And, God has given you, God has called you to something different than, the realities that we find ourselves in. But they're connected. We're all worshiping the same God, and we're all part of, lifting up this declaration of praise of who God is. And so, I've probably meandered around your question quite a bit here, but I think that one of the things that it starts with is recognizing that as we come to the table, that God has gifted us with things and experiences, but we have an opportunity to bring something to the table, but is also the opportunity to receive something from our brothers and sisters when we sit down at that table.
Gosh, I mean, you just kind of perfectly answered the other part. It feels a little bit selfish, but not just what can we learn to do better, but as the Western church, what can we kind of benefit from when we spiritually partner with these persecuted churches? And I mean, you just said it perfectly. And Scott and I both, on all of our side gigs, we both lead worship. And my church has a worship night this coming Tuesday. So I will be singing for 2 hours, and I'm going to sing a little bit louder. I know that sounds so cheesy. Like what you just said kind of just burned this image in my brain of, as I have this privilege in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with hundreds of people who are just singing their hearts out on a Tuesday night. There's people across the aisle we'll never meet that can barely make a whisper. And that's a really, really powerful image. So if there's anything else that we can benefit from that in that spiritual journey, is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I think in again, and this will go back to a little bit this idea earlier that so many of us we are living in the post-Christian culture, again, new territory for us, but yet as we walk with our brothers and sisters and see the power of their testimony and their commitment to, recognizing, this pearl of great price, and recognizing that the cost of discipleship, that is something that, we need to know. There's at Open Doors, we often, our founder, Brother Andrew, he was really inspired and struck by a verse from Revelations, and that speaking to the church at Sardis, and saying, "Wake up and strengthen what remains." And it's become, not just in our organization, but for a lot, it's become kind of a rally cry for, how we can serve and walk with the persecuted church. But what's so interesting is you read the commentaries on that chapter. Sardis was not a church; it was experiencing persecution. It was a church that was experiencing comfort, and our comfort has a way of, the enemy can use it to dull our senses. He would love nothing more than, when we've been given a gift by the God of all comfort, to think that the intention of that gift is for us to be comfortable, for us to, just sit in our comfort. But that's not why we've been given comfort. That's not, we've been called to engage. And so, I think the thing that I would encourage church leaders, to look at is, what are ways that we can walk with the persecuted church, not just for their own edification, but for our own edification as well.
Yeah. That's a welcomed and needed encouragement for people. One of the things that our goal is on this podcast is to have conversations that empower healthy churches. And so we always want to hear from people who are speaking into our audience, encouraging them. We always love to hear from your perspective, from your opinion, what is one essential component of a healthy church?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I recognize, when I was growing up, and it's still fairly prevalent, there was so much talk about, this idea of the personal relationship with Christ. And, that is important. Absolutely. No doubt about it. And that is scriptural. But it's not scriptural to the extent that if we deny the importance of community within our Christian discipleship walk and journey as well. And, I think that is an area that the church is just, obviously so equipped to be able to speak into and to facilitate this idea of how, the leaning into community can shape our discipleship journey. So, I think one of the ways, that we can really look to see, okay, is a church healthy, is to what extent are folks, allowing others to enter into their discipleship journey, and to what extent are we entering into the discipleship journey of others? That, when you talk about that idea of discipleship, that idea of a Paul and a Timothy, in what ways are we being a Timothy to people? Or are we allowing ourselves to be a Timothy to others? And in what ways are we being a Paul to others? And in what ways are we allowing others to have access to our discipleship journey? And in what ways are we accessing and entering into the discipleship journey of others?
Yeah. That's very good. And I think a much needed reminder and call to people. And so appreciate you sharing that. We're going to jump into kind of our section that we call our final five. This is a little bit more rapid fire coming at you. So the first one we'll start with is this. What is one book that you'd recommend for church leaders?
Well, I'll have to go with God Smuggler, the story of brother Andrew. I think that's a good one, a powerful one. I'm also going to tag on, though. You mentioned When Helping Hurts earlier. I think that's a phenomenal book as well that can really shape a lot of ministry.
Yes. Yeah, that was just purely coincidental. So thank you for validating.
It's a good book, important book.
It made a memory. It made an impression on me from high school. So good. Thank you. Yeah. All right, Ryan. Number 2, what is the last thing that you listened to?
The last thing that I listened to. So there's was listening to, if you're familiar with an artist by the name of Mark Hurd, he had a song "Treasures of the Broken Land," and there's a band called Chagall Guevara that covered that, and just love their version. So I was listening to that in the car yesterday driving home.
Awesome.
I was particularly interested in your answer to that, just given your background as a singer-songwriter and, in the music business, all that stuff. So,
okay, so true confession here, and this is confession is good for the soul. Yep. That was the Chagall Guevara was the answer I wanted to give, but I realized that as you're talking that I just got my Spotify monthly update, and so I had clicked through, but it just sounds too narcissistic to say the last thing I listened to was my own stuff. So, hey. I don't want to be that guy. So I'm going to go with Chagall Guevara, even though it was technically I did listen to some of my own stuff.
No one has said that yet. What's the last thing you listened to? Me.
Yeah, no.
Because nobody would confess that. That's just too narcissistic. So, yeah.
We won't tell anybody. Don't worry.
Yeah, and that question is meant to be all right, let's be honest, because sometimes it's like I want to give the answer that maybe I want to give versus, I was listening to the Lion King soundtrack, or whatever it might be, which would be mine, given that my 9-year-old is currently in a Lion King. So.
I've lived there. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Third one. What is your favorite piece of technology? And the only rule is you can't say your phone.
Yeah. Well, I think I probably have more of, of the love-hate relationship with technology. I probably lean more on the hate side of technology. So I've been a slow adapter when it comes to some of those types of stuff. But as fellow musicians, I think that you guys would, I just continue to be in awe of Pro Tools. The recording software, I am in no way adept at utilizing it. But when I sit with folks that are, I just absolutely astounded to see the work that they're able to do.
Yeah, I'm with you.
That is also the first time that answer has been given. It's like you're on a roll, a very unique.
Okay.
I love it.
First time answers.
I like it. All right. You had one earlier. You're welcome to repeat it. But number 4, is there a quote, just a nugget of wisdom that has stuck with you throughout the years?
Yeah. The one that I always go back to is, and this actually came from my brother, but he said that when you get punched in the mouth, always come up smiling, and that's not necessarily particularly spiritual. I could probably try to extrapolate some spiritual principles out of that, but it just I think a good life thing as well. That regardless of what comes, that if you come up smiling, that tends to put you on a better pathway through it.
Yeah,
it's a good reminder.
That's good. All right, last one. What is one thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
Yeah, this is one. I look back at the last few years, and I engage with a lot of pastors, and this has been a difficult few years for so many folks in church ministry. And, I think the thing that I would most encourage is, I know that the enemy is there's no shortage of false narratives that, he's trying to weave into the hearts of pastors of, just to discourage them in what they're doing. And so, I always come back to, that Ephesians 3 passage, and I'm actually going to read it here. It just says that, I pray that out of his glorious riches, he may strengthen you with power through his spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know that his love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God.
Beautiful. And that's a beautiful way to kind of wrap up our conversation. I would love if you could just to share for people, how can they learn more about what Open Doors US is doing, but also engage with everything that you're bringing to the table to grow awareness of the persecuted church?
Yeah. So the website, opendoorsus.org. I would encourage people to actually start with just downloading a copy of the World Watch List there. Again, that's a yearly publication in which we highlight the 50 countries around the globe in which persecution is the greatest. In addition to just providing a few little nuggets of information about what the realities of life look like for Christians there in each of those countries. There are also very specific prayer points, and for a year with 52 weeks, having 50 countries profiled, given specific prayer points, becomes a real good opportunity just to commit to praying over the course of a year on behalf of the persecuted church. And again, I think as people engage in prayer for the persecuted church, that they see an alignment with the heart of the Father that starts to emerge.
Yeah. Well, we're going to make sure to link to that so that people can be able to see that report and certainly start there. And we just appreciate so much the work that you and the entire team is doing to help us see what's going on and to help us take action to support and to be there to help people in our, the family of God continue to walk faithfully, even as they face persecution. So thanks so much for your time today being with us. And thank you to those of you listening, watching this. We appreciate it so much. Appreciate you being here. We hope that this conversation has been helpful for you. And if it has, we'd invite you to share it with somebody, send them the link, or like, subscribe, leave a review, especially on Apple Podcasts. That helps us get these conversations into more church leaders' ears and hopefully help empower more healthy churches. So thanks again for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.